Good morning. My name is Goulden. I am a former police officer up in Scotland. For the last 10 years of my policing service, I was a chief inspector working with the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit. I often say to people that the last 10 years of my police service are the most fruitful, the most productive, and probably the most interesting part of my career, simply because it's completely transformed how I look at issues that we see in society, and that will hopefully come through the conversation today. Policing sometimes forces people to look at issues through the lens of criminal justice, which is about who's responsible, whereas what I'm going to talk about today and what was really a big part of my last part of my police service was looking at things through a public health lens, being allowed to ask questions like why and what. The Violence Reduction Unit in Scotland has been is looked at around the UK and around the world as a centre of excellence for the prevention of violence. And whilst we've had some pretty dramatic reductions in levels of violence in Scotland, in the last 10 years we've got a 40% reduction in homicides, an 81% reduction in young people carrying weapons in Scotland, amongst other statistics. Some really good success has taken place, but one thing we are not in Scotland is complacent, because we know if we take the foot off the pedal, the potential is for violence to creep up again. And what is bucking the trend from these successes are levels of sexual violence and domestic violence, which, like across the UK, continue to rise. And I think having the lens of public health allows us to be asking the questions, why is that happening? Yes, more people are coming forward to report sexual violence and domestic violence, but are we living in a very sexually toxic environment, which is contributing towards the culture that our young people are growing up in? So for me, what has contributed towards the success here in Scotland is probably the narrative. We've moved from the criminal justice, we still talk about enforcement, but we've now moved into this public health lens, which is really allowing us to ask the questions I've talked about before. Why is something happening? What is contributing to the issue? And one thing we've moved away from is looking at violence as solely as a criminal aspect. We talked about knife crime. It's a big buzzword down south just now, and we have talked about knife crime in Scotland in years gone by, but we tend to look at violence as the behaviour, as the attitude. Knives are the symptom of lots of issues that we're seeing in society. And I feel this public health approach and support from successive Scottish governments over the years have really kept the VRU moving forward. We've started and we're going to keep moving. And again, this narrative that I've talked about allows us to start to move from the enforcement deterrent to things like looking at adversity in childhood. Young people growing up in violent communities, violent relationships, what is that doing to their body? And we know the science tells us that whilst people might forget what happened to them, the body won't forget. And without that buffer in life, without that resilience that we talk about, there is potential for people to become victims of violence and perpetrators of violence. And domestic violence has been a big focus for policing and for the VRU over the last few years. And I often say there'll never be peace in our streets until we have peace in the home. So it's really important that we have that focus on domestic abuse. We also look at second chances. We look at the potential for people to come out of that prison system into employment. Give a person a job, watch them flourish, give them hope. How can we give hope to the hopeless? And that's on all of us. That ability to maybe we need, if a person's accepted responsibility, can we give them that second chance, that third chance, that fourth chance? Because lots of people haven't had the resilience like I've had in my life, and is it any wonder they're in the right situation? Potentially things could go wrong for that person. I think we need to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. And what I mean by that is, let's hold people accountable for what's going on, but let's be brave enough to be asking the why and the what questions. That for me has been one of the successes in Scotland. So what do I suggest from my colleagues down in England and Wales? And clearly something is happening. I'm angry. Sometimes I'm getting angry. I'm getting frustrated at the politicians and the media and some of these social commentators who I feel are just grandstanding to the masses, telling the masses what they want. People should be locked up. We need stop and search, stop and search. And I think it's become a debate more on enforcement than prevention, and we need to shift that narrative to that preventive discussion. Enforcement needs to be part of this approach, but it can't be everything. So my tips really are: first thing, stop focusing on knives. Knives are part of the issue, but you have a violence problem. Focus on the attitudes, the behaviours that you're seeing. Having the brave enough to ask the question, why is something happening? So focus on this behaviour. Tip two for me is get this strategy in place. I'm not seeing a coherent strategy. One which is communicating to the police what their part is, education what their part is, health and other organisations. So get this strategy in place. Let's have the contain and manage focus, the stop and search. Swift visible justice is important. It's important for society, needs to see that. But stop and search may not bring you about the results you feel, and actually might make the situation a little bit worse. So consider that stop and engage, that stop and talk focus. Start to work with the community, engage the young people that you think are involved in these types of incidents. And at the same time, for me, start to develop the partnerships with education, with health, with statutory services, with voluntary services. Get them involved, communicate, get this narrative in place, communicate this narrative, and send people out to actually do that work. The benefits of the strategy are huge. This narrative that I've talked about, it's just keeping people on the right track. Fear is a powerful motivator, and I think fear prevents progress, and promoting fear should not be part of your strategy. Stop showing knives. Big tip: stop showing knives on your social media outlets. While you think you're doing a good job and you're recovering, some pretty sizable weapons, when you start to show these on your Twitter feeds, social media feeds, are you potentially telling people there's problems out there? Do I, as a young man, need to be carrying a weapon to protect myself? Are you increasing fear? Just consider that. The psychologists and the social norms theorists say there's potential damage that we're doing here. So just be mindful of that. Rather than emphasize the norms that you're seeing, create the norms that you want. Let's create the society. Let's create the norms that we want from our young people and from the population in general. So be very clear. This is a long-term journey. This isn't a short-term fix. This is a it's actually hard to have an end point for this. We need to keep moving forward. Tip 3, a focus on engaging and empowering communities. 30 years in the police service have taught me many things, but the big thing it taught me was that prevention starts in a community. And think wide on this issue. Start to look at the good in your communities, the excellent work that's ongoing already by some fantastic people that will be out there doing work on a daily basis. It's how we support them. It's about them, not really about us or you as the person in charge. Give people the trust and empower them to go out and do the work. The majority of people in our communities are really the law-abiding people. Communicate the narrative, and reassure them. Get the media on board. They're a big part of this, and help get them to help you communicate the good news stories that's taking place in your communities. People out there often want us the lead up to incidents, or they might come across victims of friends, family who are victims of violence. We need to give them skills as well. How do we equip the bystanders is a big conversation that we're having up here in Scotland. Giving people the tools and the strategies to get friends away from dangerous situations, or support a friend who may be a victim of domestic violence or sexual violence. Give people the narrative, what they can talk about to their friends, the tools to take people away. I often get frustrated that we just expect people to act, but then we get angry when people don't act. There's lots of factors here. Give people the tools, help them overcome the fear, the physical fear, the social fear. Give people the tools. Importantly for me, involve the young people in the communities. Young people are often missing from lots of conversations out there. Take young people to meetings if you're involved in this work. Hear their voices. It's important that their voices are heard, because they're the ones that are living and breathing this just now. And they're scared. So get them involved, find out what's going on, and get them to come up with them, get them to be part of the solution as well. Tip 4, this focus on domestic abuse. I said before, there'll never be peace in our streets and in our society until we have peace in the home. And lots of people are asking, why are people going into gangs or carrying weapons? And if you've not got safety in your home, is it any wonder people are moving into the friendship circle and potentially the gangs? So being exposed to domestic violence is an adverse childhood experience. And if we can focus on domestic violence, we can reduce the adversity that's in our communities, in our society, and hopefully we'll reduce violence for the long term. My last tip, I've tried to look at a number of issues that are out with the current discussion, and my last tip might be a little bit controversial, but let's be brave enough to focus on this notion of gender. If you look at violence in this country and around the world, perpetrators of violence are most likely to be men. That doesn't mean that we ignore female perpetrators of violence or male victims of females' violence, but let's be brave enough to be asking questions. Why is this? Why are men most at risk of becoming victims of violence, but also perpetrators of violence? Think about suicide in the UK and around the world. Men are 2, 3, 4 times more likely to kill themselves than females. Ask the question, why is that happening? Many of many young boys are living in homes where they lack the sort of male role model, and many will have witnessed their mothers, their sisters have been attacked in the home by a father. They may be victims themselves, and this biography of masculinity will follow them through their entire lives, and violence could become the tool of their masculinity. So for me, areas of focus would include things like looking at how do we male role models, how do we talk about fathers in a very productive way, get fathers involved. They might not be present, but how can we help them to be present? If they might be separated from partners, in jail or wherever, fathers can still be present whilst they're not present. And it's about having that positive conversation about men and about fathers in particular. Talk about stereotypes. You know, stereotypes are the guiding force from a lot of young boys. And as a man myself in my early years, guided by the expectations. Talk about the stereotypes, make fun of the stereotypes, because that's not what boys and men want to be, and discuss the harms of stereotypes. For me, it's about equipping young boys and young men with the tools to be men in 2019 and 2020 and beyond. What skills do they need? Boys are struggling academically, in relationships and sexually, and we need to help our boys to be part of society, to have a role in society. You know, focus on gender doesn't mean, as I said before, we don't focus on female victims or female perpetrators of violence. It just allows us to start to, again, ask the question why. And really, just to bring this to a close, you know, thank you for taking the time to watch this film today. And I want to ask you a question: why have you clicked on this link? You know, why, you know, what's brought you here, and why have you clicked on me in particular? And I think we all need to have a why. If we're involved in the prevention of violence, defining a why is very important to me. My tip is, let's start looking at violence, why you tackle violence, start looking at violence as a personal issue. You know, you might be police officers, teachers, social workers, voluntary sector, wherever that might be, but you're also mothers, your fathers, your brothers, your sisters, your friends, you're someone's friend. You're part of society. Bring your whole self to this party. You know, don't wait for violence to come knocking at your door. You know, I've lost a friend to knife crime in Scotland. A young guy that I worked with in the past, found himself in an argument and was stabbed and killed. And when I heard about that, it really impacted on me negatively. It really inspired me to be doing the work that I'm doing today. You know, I know people who've lost daughters due to domestic violence. So that indirect impact of me, it makes me feel angry, but it inspires me to sort of do the work that I do. I'm a father. I've got two adult children, two girls, Jennifer and Alice, who are very special to me, and both of them have had issues in their life as a result of some men's violence. So again, this is personal to me. And rather than me going out knocking down doors and doing the man thing, I think it's important that I use my voice as a man to talk about these issues. I also feel that if we looked at violence as a personal issue, something that could happen to us, we're less likely to blame victims, judge victims. We do that. Society blames victims for what happens to them. We're also more likely to feel comfortable challenging our peers if they behave in a way that is problematic, abusive, and could get them in trouble. So I feel that if you take this personally, you've got more opportunity to challenge our friends. But I also feel you're more likely to have the courage to understand the backstory that I've talked about today. You'll have the courage to understand what's going on behind a person's behaviour. And I feel that is a big part of looking at these as issues of violence as a personal issue. And this isn't about going soft. I'm not going soft on violence. This is about having the courage to keep people holding people accountable, but having the courage to ask why. You know, why violence is taking place in our society. And I could go on. You know, violence is a big issue, and it's a systemic issue, and systemic issues require big solutions. I wish you all the best in your work. Please get in touch if you need any more support. But good luck in your journey, and keep moving forward. Keep doing the job. The outcomes are there, and the successes and rewards are plentiful. So thanks very much for listening.